The Terrifying Lies Podcast, with music and stories by Craig Nybo. Hello, friends, and welcome to the Terrifying Lies Podcast. I'm your host, Craig Nybo. It's great to have you back. This is the place where we step into worlds better left unknown, where danger and wonder live side by side. It's a space for dark imaginings and strange tales. Before we dive in, I have a small favor to ask. I think you know how podcasts thrive. A positive review can mean everything. If you've been enjoying this show, it takes a moment to leave a review on your favorite streaming service. Share what you love. Leave a bunch of glowing stars. These small actions bring new listeners into the fold, and they help keep the stories alive. A quick update. If you liked the 10-part story, Red Annex, from last season, you'll be happy to know the album is now streaming. I spent a lot of time polishing those songs, and now you can hear them in all their glory. Search for Red Annex by Craig Nybo on your favorite music streaming service and take a listen. One more note. Today's episode is part 4 of a 13-part story. If you're new to rock and roll and resurrection, Bieber's Finger, I recommend starting at the beginning with part 1. Trust me, it'll make a lot more sense that way. Let's jump into the story. Here's a quick recap of where we've been. Superfan Twana had her world shattered when a car bomb hit her idol, Bieber, not to be confused with any real people, outside a concert venue. In the chaos, she managed to grab something bizarre, Bieber's finger. Desperate and driven, Twana forced her gangster brother Butch to arrange a meeting with his boss, Joe DiPeccio. She cut a deal. Clone Bieber from the finger and she'll rebuild his career, starting with a performance at the Pan-Galactic Prom Show, the most prestigious gig in the universe. In return, DiPeccio would claim most of the profits and secure a safe haven for Twana's mother in residential rehab. Now Twana and her clone are traveling on a space bus to the Polidris System. She's shaping him into the Bieber of old, teaching him to sing, to move, to charm. But the journey is perilous. She must keep him hidden. Recognition could destroy everything. And with that, here is part 4 of Rock and Roll and Resurrection, Bieber's Finger. I'll see you on the other side. A few people populated the observation deck, sitting at tables with light refreshments, their eyes cast to the thick glass that separated them from the vacuum of space. Travelers new to intergalactic transport gawked at the raw enormity of the periphery, the absolute insignificance of the space bus, enormous as it was in the vastness of infinity. Twana and Bieber took a window-side table. No sooner had they sat down than a waitress came to take their order. Twana couldn't fathom that all expenses, food, activities, every luxury were covered by DiPeccio's tab. She ordered a pair of strawberry sodas and a plate of cookies to share with Bieber. The waitress wrote down the order and bopped off to another table. A young man entered the observation deck. Since stowing away, he'd made his way up through the cargo hold into the passenger decks of the space bus. He'd shed the flight crew uniform and found a new wardrobe for himself after breaking into one of the luggage containers. He wore dark clothes and a nondescript newsboy cap for good measure. He'd thrown on a pair of Wayfarer specs and stopped shaving, hoping that his initial scruff would lend something to his disguise. He'd learned that it didn't take much to stay hidden. People, for the most part, couldn't see beyond their own selves. They cared nothing for those around them and hence paid little attention to the details. The young man picked up a digital magazine from an entertainment rack and took a table in the corner of the observation deck where he could keep his back to the wall. He raised the reading terminal to cover most of his face, but kept his eyes on the small crowd cluttered at tables in the large room. He paid particular attention to the girl and the Bieber look-alike sitting next to the observation window. He'd already noted their cabin and would further stake out their comings and goings as they establish habits during the 6-week flight. 16-year-old blonde with strawberry highlights sat at a table in the observation deck across from her mother. She sipped on a chocolate shake while her mother indulged in something a little stronger. Since Mindy Lee's dad had left them flat, her mother had taken to drinking more than Mindy Lee liked. Although her mother had made it a point not to criticize her dad, even after he had treated the two of them so cruelly before storming out the door 8 months ago, Mindy Lee could see the pain in her mother's eyes. Her mom hadn't been an idiot during the divorce settlement. Her father had worked for Intertran and had plenty of money. She hired the best lawyer she could, and that lawyer had seen to it that Mindy Lee and her mom would never have to worry about expenses for the rest of their lives. But money didn't dampen the sadness. Even though Mindy Lee's father had been brutal, he still had his sweet side. Mindy Lee wondered if he missed her since the divorce. She suspected that he had, but he hadn't visited or even written her in 4 months. Mindy Lee's mother had red eyes. She'd been crying again. Mindy Lee didn't even know how to comfort her anymore. She supposed just being with her mother was the best she could do. She looked across the observation deck at all the people, both young and old couples, families, business associates dressed in expensive suits. She had her problems, but then she supposed everyone had problems. It was a matter of confronting those problems head on. Someone familiar caught Mindy Lee's eye. A boy, sitting with his girlfriend. As she recognized him, poorly disguised in a fedora, glasses, and a scarf, her heart fluttered. She sat up in her chair, and her breathing quickened.
"What is it?"
her mother asked.
"Can you give me a minute?"
Her mother waved her away with a dismissive gesture and sipped on the brown liquid in her glass. Mindy Lee walked over to Twana and Bieber's table. She stood close enough for a good look, her eyes transfixed on Bieber. He glanced up at her awkwardly as she stood above him.
"Can I help you?"
Twana asked, fixing Mindy Lee with a pair of squinting eyes.
"I know who you are,"
Mindy Lee said to Bieber, ignoring Twana.
"You can't fool me, you know."
Twana stood up and put a hand on Mindy Lee's shoulder.
"You must have mistaken him for someone else. This is my boyfriend."
"Are you kidding?
Mindy Lee removed Twana's hand from her shoulder.
He doesn't have a girlfriend, unless you count every single teenager on planet Earth."
"I don't know what you're talking about."
Twana said, trying to wedge herself in between Mindy Lee and the table. Mindy Lee leaned forward and picked up Bieber's left hand. He yanked his hand back from her, but the damage had already been done. She spotted it, the heart-shaped birthmark right there on his finger.
"I knew it,"
Mindy Lee said. She pulled up a chair and sat down at Twana and Bieber's table.
"You are Bieber."
"I hate that guy,"
Bieber said, looking up at Twana with an expression that asked, "Was that all right?" Twana grimaced.
"I don't know what you're talking about,"
she said, but she already knew that it was a foregone conclusion. This girl seemed to know as much about Bieber as she did. Mindy Lee sat back in her chair and took in every square inch of Bieber. A smile lilted her face. She couldn't hide the beaming.
"I knew it was true. They said it was all trumped up fan rumors."
"What are you talking about?"
Twana asked.
"That he faked his death, and that he was planning a big comeback."
Mindy Lee nodded. She couldn't take her eyes off the beautiful boy.
"You know, a hat and glasses and scarf aren't gonna hide you from me. I'm your biggest fan."
"I'm his biggest fan."
Twana corrected, then raised a hand to her mouth.
"I hate that guy,"
Bieber said. Mindy Lee rounded on Twana, making a shrugging gesture with her hand and shaking her head.
"Why is he with you?"
"First of all, he's not Bieber.
Twana said.
He only looks like Bieber."
"But that's not true. Even from across the room, I recognized him. He's a real Bieber, inside and out."
"I hate that guy,"
Bieber said. Twana sighed.
Oh, if you only knew.
"If this isn't Bieber, then why are you heading to the Pangalactic Prom Show? The event in intergalactic music entertainment. Bieber was gonna headline until that chunkhole Nix blew him to smithereens. The only answer is that it was all a ruse. He's gonna headline the prom show, and you're taking him there. Besides, who'd ever want to see that Funk Toast band?"
From the corner of the observation room, the young man wearing a newsboy hat and wayfarer glasses kept a tight watch on the girl, on the Bieber look-alike, and on the new girl who had pushed her way into their business. Things were going to get complicated fast If someone had already recognized the look-alike, he might have to make a move sooner than he expected. Something caught his eye from across the observation deck. A pair of men entered, their eyes cold. Although the two men, dressed in nondescript tourist clothing, had ostensibly come to the observation deck for a glimpse into space, the young man recognized the trained intensity in their eyes. The two men panned the room, searching for something specific. Finally, one of the two men spotted the Bieber look-alike. He said something to his partner. The other man took a cursory glance and nodded. The two of them sat at a table across the deck, keeping the girls, Bieber, and both the exits under watch. Yes, things were getting complicated, the young man in glasses thought, as he split his attention between the Bieber look-alike and the two men. Twana took Bieber's hand and stood up.
We have to go now.
No,
Mindy Lee said, taking Bieber's other hand.
I'm not going to say a word. You can trust me. I would never do anything to hurt him.
He's not Bieber.
Twana whispered harshly. Mindy Lee smiled and tilted her head to the side.
Come on, we're going.
Twana said, tugging Bieber's hand out of Mindy Lee's clutches. Mindy Lee rifled through her purse and fumbled out a pen. She hurriedly slid a napkin across the table toward Bieber.
Please, at least give me an autograph.
We're going.
Twana said, tugging Bieber away from the table. Mindy Lee stood up.
I will scream if he doesn't give me an autograph.
Twana and Bieber stopped. Twana smiled at a few nearby passengers who were looking up from their snacks and drinks.
Fine,
Twana said.
Sign her napkin. Then it's back to the cabin.
Bieber picked up Mindy Lee's pen and scrawled something on her napkin. No sooner had he finished than Twana tugged him away from the table. She conducted him through the observation deck toward the exit. The young man with glasses buried his face in his digital magazine and let the girl and the Bieber look-alike pass. When he looked up, the two men were already on the move, cutting toward the exit. The young man with glasses stood and met them just before they left the deck. Both men fixed him with glares. Nostrils flared. Neither the men nor the young man wearing glasses said a word. Everything was communicated in a silent moment that crackled between them. After a beat, one of the two men nodded at the other. They turned and walked toward the opposite exit. The young man with glasses waited a handful of seconds, then followed the two men. He had his work cut out for him. He would have to use stealth. This was turning into a life-or-death situation. Mindy Lee smiled so wide that her face hurt as she picked up the napkin. In a disjointed scrawl, Bieber had written the words, "I hate that guy." Mindy Lee lost her smile in degrees over a full 5 count. She tossed the napkin in the trash on her way back to her mother's table.
Who was that? Friend of yours?
Her mother asked. She sat down, her face frumpy.
Yeah, you could say that.
What a coincidence that you should find a friend right here on this flight.
Well, he's really everybody's friend.
Maybe you should catch up with him and the girl later. Might be fun for you to hang out with people your own age.
Mindy Lee looked at the exit through which Bieber and the girl had left.
That's a good idea. I might do just that.
The smile returned to Mindy Lee's face. The young man wearing glasses tailed the two men from the observation deck. He stayed back, keeping to the shadows, ducking into nooks, trailing behind wheeled caddies pushed by orderlies through the hallways. The two gentlemen wandered into a smoking room where they lit up expensive cigars and chatted for a while. The young man couldn't read lips, but by their expressions, he reckoned they were professionals. He reckoned they worked for somebody important, that their boss, whoever he was, had spared no expense in hiring them. The two men left the smoking room and moved back into the hall. They took their time in the space bus, stopping at this attraction and moving on to that. They intermingled with the other passengers, acting nonchalant. The young man with glasses watched them from afar. He wasn't aboard the space bus for recreation or to get to the Pan-Galactic Prom Show. His interests didn't go beyond Bieber and the girl. And if the two men shared that interest, the young man would stay with them until he knew their intentions. The young man followed them through the observation deck to the ship's rear wing of private cabins known as the cheap seats by the wealthier passengers. The young man became more concerned as the two men made their way with no hesitation toward cabin 319, the girl and Bieber lookalike's cabin. The young man remained stealthy, following in silence. The three of them moved through the hall, passing banks of cabin doors on either side. Soon, they were alone in the corridor. The young man with glasses bit his bottom lip, feeling naked without the cover of the other passengers. The two men would notice him, and when they did, they would know he'd been tailing them. The young man touched the lapel of his jacket, felt the bulge of a knife he had stolen from the kitchen, tucked into an inner pocket. He could try a diversion like falling, acting hurt, and letting the men come to him, but being prone when they reached him would take away his high ground advantage. The young man knew how to fight. The two older gentlemen looked seasoned. They wouldn't flail their punches like back alley thugs. The young man decided that a direct approach would be best. He reached under his lapel, put one hand on the handle of the knife. He sprinted straight up the hall toward the two men. There would be noise when he reached them. Someone might hear the commotion and come out of his cabin. The young man couldn't think about it. He had to act. If there were any witnesses, he'd have to take care of them later. The two gentlemen turned just as the young man with glasses closed on them. He drew the kitchen knife with his left hand and struck with his right. A calculated blow with all his force directly to the bridge of the larger man's nose. The man fell backward to the floor and put a hand to his face. The young man leapt over him and slashed at the other man. He backed away, giving the young man with glasses the few seconds he needed to land two solid kicks to the prone man's head, knocking him out. Before the shorter man could process what had happened, the young man with glasses shoved him against a wall. He drove the edge of the kitchen knife into the man's stomach and clamped his other hand down on his throat.
If you say even one word without my permission, I'll unspool your intestines all over your friend. And don't think I can't do it.
The man stopped struggling. There was no fear in his eyes. The young man lightened up his grip.
Who do you work for?
The young man asked.
We work for the same man you work for,
He said.
You can get that knife out of my stomach. I don't have anything to hide from you.
The young man let up a little.
You DePecio's man?
That's right. You can't possibly think that DePeccio would send the girl and her pet off on an adventure by themselves, can you? DePeccio protects his investments. We're here to make sure everything is copacetic. Question is, what are you doing here, Butch?
The young man looked both ways. He'd been made.
I know how DePeccio works.
Butch said.
I know what it means when he sends a couple of guerrillas to protect his investment.
And you know that should anything go south in this deal, anything at all, we have our orders.
Butch pulled the man away from the wall by the lapel and shoved him back again, slamming him so hard that he worried that the boom would bring curious passengers out of their cabins for a look.
You and your friend need to remember one thing.
Butch said, quietly but with such intensity that it felt like he was shouting.
Twana is my sister. If anything happens to her, anything at all, I will take you down.
The man laughed and shook his head.
Look, we're just an insurance policy. Anything goes wrong, it's gonna be your little sis's fault. As they say, her destiny lies in her hands.
You just stay away from her.
Butch said.
We'll do whatever we need to, and you won't stop us. You caught us off guard this time, but rest assured it won't happen again.
Butch believed him. He resisted the urge to reveal his fear by swallowing the lump that had formed in his throat.
Now,
The man said.
Why don't you let me help my friend? We'll be on our way. Like I said, we're just here to make sure everything is copacetic. On the up and up.
Butch hesitated for a moment, then backed off. He kept the kitchen knife ready. The man kept his eyes on Butch as he bent down and gently shook his friend awake and helped him to his feet. After regaining consciousness, the larger man checked his nose, still bleeding, then spotted Butch. He balled up his fists and coiled up for a pounce. The shorter man stopped him with a hand to the shoulder.
Cool it. This is none other than Butch Birch.
The larger man eyed Butch up and down. Butch swore he could see his pectorals flexing beneath his suit.
What are you doing here?
He practically growled the words.
Just making sure everything is copacetic. On the up and up.
Butch said, holding the knife where it could easily be seen.
Everything is gonna be just fine.
The shorter man said.
Why, we're practically on the same team.
You just stay away from Twana.
Butch said. The shorter man put a hand on his friend's shoulder. Two of them backed off, keeping their eyes on Butch.
Don't fret, kid,
he said.
Everything is cool.
The two men backed down the hall. Once they were enough away to be comfortable, they turned and strode off toward the observation deck. Butch released the built-up tension in his body with an enormous exhale. He slid the kitchen knife back into his lapel pocket and wandered toward cabin 319.
I could stand for a million things, yeah, I know. For the stars and the stripes, or the highs and the lows. Could stand for the dreamers, those chasing the light. For a better world, or for doing what's right. I could fight for the future, for truth in the lies. I could stand for the underdog lifting their eyes. But if I'm gonna stand for anything true, baby, I'm gonna stand up forever for you. I'm gonna stand for you. Stand up, gonna give you what's right. Gonna see it tonight. I'll stand for you. Through every storm, when the world gets cold, I'll keep you warm. For you, I'll be the one. No matter what, I'll stand for you. I could stand for the broken, the lost and the found. I could stand for the fighters that never back down. But when I see you, I know what I should do. 'Cause baby, I'm gonna stand up just for you. I could stand just for peace, or for standing up tall. Be the guy that you call to catch you when you fall. I could stand for the silence, or shout in the crowd. Be the voice that you hear so clear and so loud. When everything's fading, baby, I'll be your light. When you're feeling alone in the dead of the night, for you, I would walk a million miles just to look at your smile. Yeah, to look at your smile. I'll stand for you through every storm. When the world gets cold, I'll keep you warm. For you, I'll be the one. No matter what, I'll stand for you. I'll stand for you. Through every storm. When the world gets cold, I'll keep you warm. For you, I'll be the one. No matter what, I'll stand for you.
What do you think of today's song? I know, it's a bit ridiculous, but that's the fun of it. I actually love writing songs with a sense of humor, if you haven't noticed already. This one's written as if it came from Bieber himself. Well, the fictional version in this story, not to be confused by anyone in the real world who may coincidentally share the same name. The song Stand gets a mention in the narrative, so I thought, why not bring it to life? Synth pop isn't my usual style, but I enjoy writing new things. It's like stepping into someone else's shoes for a while. I hope it gave you a chuckle. Keep your ears open for more songs as the story unfolds. I have plenty more on the way. Thanks for joining me on the Terrifying Lies podcast. Every time you listen, it means the world to me. When I sit down to write these stories or compose these songs, I think about you, what you'd enjoy, what might make you laugh or send a shiver down your spine. You are at the heart of it all. The world is a tough place, but small acts of kindness can make it brighter. Be good to someone else today. Even a little can go a long way. Let's make the world better, one act at a time. Until next time, I bid you sweet dreams. Or should I say, sweet nightmares.
This has been the Terrifying Lies podcast. Please come again. You're welcome here.